Chante waste na pechus apielo. Le unkipiki hohe wastelo. Ho wakantanka namako wa ambetule e niwazi oplakinkelo. Ukuchiela wa ontaya amapasayo. Me waka pata hawa ya. Najio. Le unkipiki hohe wastelo. Itako ya nkapiki optayan toka iwachintelo. Ejataki tokata oina jiwa utani piktanawe. Oh, Midakoye Oyasi, Midakoye Oyasi. So I'm going to switch gears now and speak this language that is fairly new here in Turtle Island. It's not that old. It's a baby language to us as Native people, at least to me. Namely because I'm trying to squeeze the whole universe into a street, a one-way street. And that street is called Concepts and Domination. And it has, originally our language has no nouns and it's all verbs. So everything has verbs, everything is alive. Even we do not have in the original language the idea of I or me or my or mine or ours. We know that the center of the universe is everywhere. That everything is in relationship and not connected, but in relationship, because it has to be. Nothing is ever disconnected. This is why we say nothing is ever connected, but it's all in relationship. They must balance each other in a constant basis, ongoing basis, and in that ideas of where this language comes from is that of the earth. I think that all languages come from the earth, is that we tend to take it away or distance ourselves because of concepts, and concepts only concepts really take us away from relationship, because concepts are, to me, a merely human creation. And in this human creation, it's only about humans. The anthropocentrism, they call it. And we tend to be first in the Western world, that everything is about us. But in the Lakota world, we are the last to be last to be created. Therefore, we are the most ignorant. Whereas the other way of thinking, that we're the most supreme, because we can build bombs and we can build technology and make things comfortable for the human. And yet, we are denying what we have really done to ourselves, but also to Earth. I say these things because there's a reality going on that many people don't want to perceive, or even do they have the language to understand this. We are taught in our way not to listen to reply, but to listen to understand. And so it's not a knowledge and information based language. It's based on what I say, wisdom of the earth, and mostly because we don't have a word for domination. There is no word for domination because we must relate at all times. And in relating at all times, there needs to be a language of relationship rather than a measured who's better and who's worse, or superior or inferior. And so we don't think along those lines. If I could help a little bit about how the difference is, we know the similarities between humans, but when it comes to human beings, we don't know the differences. So if I can say in the language I'm speaking now, English, is that when I say I'm riding a horse, and you can imagine that, so we give a lot of attention to imagination. But in the other way of being and thinking is you're feeling what you're saying. I'm riding the horse. You feel that without imagining it. So one is feeling, one is intuition, one is actually sharing or being in a relationship with that horse rather than an imagining creative concept. And then we can put that in a book, we can put that in history, and then put a period behind it as a subject. And the reason why we don't have originally nouns is because it's subjective, it's objectified, and it tends to, how do I say it? It tends to individualize you. And so the I in this language I'm speaking is self-centered. It's you are a noun, you're subject to being a noun, a single individual. And in the other way, in the Lakota, if there's no word, then the only way I can describe it is that the I, you are a verb. You're in constant motion, and if you look deep within oneself, it's the same, that you are constantly in motion, you know, and that is already done, or it's already moving through the universe in that fashion without concept. This is balancing our language, our bodies are already trying to balance. But there's one factor among humans is that we are trying to control by dominating. So we come up with concepts to dominate and make ourselves feel like we're secure, and yet the concepts make us more and more insecure because we are distancing the earth. Now I say this in a language is we are distancing the earth. So if we are distancing earth, the distance is not so far when we remove the, or this, or that. So we are distancing earth, and yet earth has not distanced us at all. So I'm going to come from this place of being with the earth in relationship, because the earth has always recognized us. The earth has always giving to us. Earth has always balanced us. Earth has never given up on us. And all these languages that are disappearing, such as indigenous languages that primarily do not have noun-based languages. And when you have these relationships with languages that are being lost, so is the wisdom. Because information and knowledge, there's so much of it, an elder of mine says, there's so much of information and knowledge. We don't know what to do with it anymore. So we price it and we make it, you know, economical to ourselves and it's based on meritocracy. The more you have of this information and knowledge, the more wealthy you are. And that's a Western way. But the other way is that we need the wisdom to get us through the information and knowledge. We need the wisdom that is coming from the earth to get over ourselves, because we are so self-centered as the human. And so with the information and knowledge, we have become human doings. And we've forgotten about the human being. And now I'm going to go a little bit further. In the original language, even right now, there is no word or concept for human being. In our language of Lakota, there is no word for human being. And now we're going to switch to the science mind of the West. In translation of a, how do you say this? Yeah, Ikshe Wichasha. I am a Wichasha. Wichasha Mielo is meaning that I am a gift of the stars, the purity of the stars. And you think about that in a scientific Western way, it's true. And now you want to wonder, well, how do the native peoples know this without taking the earth apart? How do they know that everything is from the stars without extracting it and blowing it up and changing the molecules to find out secrets of life? So it's because of experiencing the relationship. And that relationship is based upon the intuition of the earth. The intuition of the earth says there needs to be languages to convey this, you would call it energy of the earth. An intuition, we cannot speak Lakota without intuition. It's impossible. But I can speak English without intuition because it's subject and noun filled, objectifying. And so there's a difference. And this is why we have difficulty truly translating. And we could say, oh, all languages are like this. That's true. But then there's languages that have, are only noun based. And then there's languages, indigenous languages mostly, that are disappearing, that are intuitive based. And so you see the extraction of the Western mind and concepts are constantly going outside of its box to find something to bring back in order to feel good about being in the box. Now, it's where I call it the para box, para B-O-X, is because there is a cause and effect. And then there's superior and inferior. And then there's a beginning and an ending. And we're all trying to fit in that box of concept. And in the indigenous world, there's no time, there's no need for time. There's no need for cause and effect. And there's no need for superior or inferior. So basically, the box does not exist. The container doesn't exist. The material doesn't exist. And imagination doesn't exist. Creativity doesn't exist. And you can feel that if you allow yourself to. You feel the openness of the universe. And what Black Elk said from the Lakota, that the center of the universe is everywhere. And when we understand that, we feel that, then what language is describing that? I described it in English because I can conceive it in English and have concepts for it. But when you have a language that is speaking it, feeling it all the time, there is no need for conscience, a right and wrong. There is only consciousness. Consciousness is only about respect. So when you have conscience, you're in the box of reasoning, you're in the box of rules and regulation. And so what I have and my studies have viewed, not just for comparative, but the differences, because that's how I was taught the logic of the West, is to compare and judge. And, and this is where I'm coming from, and speaking this language is difficult. And it's difficult to judge in my language. It's difficult to say inferior or but it's all that we always have to standardize the Lakota so that English speakers can understand, because that logic comes out of Greece. And to me, that logic is actually very linear, very narrow, very restrictive. And so we derive some sense of mobility or identity out of that restrictiveness. And therefore individualism, possession, to make one worth, then that worth is material gain, or even charity, that you feel better about yourself when you give it, you're giving it because you've taken it from someone else. Now, there may be some angst you feel from me, because that's the motion, the continuum motion of what has happened to Native people. So I'll talk about this, but then that's where we have to go. We have to balance it all out, because I can talk about good feelings and good feel and leave the shadow behind. But it's about noticing the shadow. It's with us all the time. So this language is balancing the shadow, and the shadow is balancing the light. And so we're always including. And so you can think along the lines of inclusion rather than exclusion. So in these places that I come from, where I grew up, I want to describe how, excuse me, how this was, where I grew up. I was born in a place where, in the middle of the geographical center of Turtle Island, or North America. And in this geographical center, there's a place called Chesapa, or the Black Hills. And in this place, at that time when I was born, it was illegal for Native people, the Lakota people, to not be born in hospitals. It was illegal for us to be born naturally. So, and my mother had to walk 3 miles to the hospital so that I would be born. The reason why in those days that when I was young, there was no cars, there were no telephones, there was no electricity on the reservation. And so my mother and father lived with my grandmother and my grandfather. And my father and grandfather had gone out hunting on their horses. And my mother was pregnant with me. I had an older brother, and my grandmother were there, and my mother's water broke. So she didn't want me to be born or be taken away by the government and the churches. So she waddled 3 miles to the hospital. And there I was born inside this Western hospital. My father rode up just in time to be there for the birth. But on the way, my mother kept saying, hold on, baby, hold on. And she would say this in Lakota. And that was my first lesson. And that was called patience. So patience was my first value to understand. So this is how I learned how to listen in a good way, not to reply, but just to understand what people are really feeling underneath the words that they're saying. Because words can help you deny, words can take you away from intuition if you're not coming from that way of the earth, because the earth doesn't lie. The earth never has lied to us, but look what we've done to ourselves. Even deceiving ourselves as good people or even bad people, and going one way or the other. So this dichotomy of binary thinking, right and wrong, left and right, black and white, enemy, friend, God, devil, all these ideas that come from the Western way of conceiving do not truly exist in the older indigenous ways of living. It can't be, because you have all life around you, and you want to how do you say, relate to all that life. And so all that life has its own language. And so we're understanding the languages by living in it and not merely shopping. So in a way, I think I was going to start today's, and it's mainly because some of you may know that we don't have an agenda as natives. In the Western way, we have to. So we kowtow to that. But in the other way, we don't have an agenda. So part of that having an agenda was I had emailed and wanted everybody to go to a place around where you're staying and ask a stone if you could remove it and bring it with you to what we're doing now, but also to remember where you took the stone from, because those little stones have been put there in balance by the earth, and that may affect the rest of the earth. But what we have forgotten is that we take it for granted that we can go and remove those stones for our own benefit. And yet, because of that, we are still adapting the earth to our needs rather than adapting ourselves to the needs of the earth. And so in this way, I have a stone, and this stone here was flat at one time, and it was sitting on a small butte or small mountain in South Dakota, and lightning struck it, and it turned the stone round. And only spiritual interpreters, in a way, harvest these stones that are on top of buttes or tall hills, and they know which ones to harvest. But then they use them in ceremony after, because that communication with the earth has been taught to these what you would call medicine people. And so in that relationship, this medicine has been shared or given through the internal structures of the earth languages, and that has come through intuition. So the languages that I'm saying is it's all intuition, and that's the consciousness that certain languages, certain ways of thinking, domination, try to keep us away from our intuition, which is true consciousness. Because what we say is that the trees, the animates, which I never call animals anymore, I call them animates, because animal means bad soul. So I call them animates. The birds, the animates, the fish, all have a relationship, and they don't have to verbalize it like we do, because they have stopped crying. It's a human who still verbalizes because we're still crying. And so we're doing what we can to try to understand how to live with the earth as indigenous peoples, but also how the earth lives with us. How does she live with us? You know, I can say I planted a garden and I grow the garden, but that's only half true. It's only half true, because really the garden grows you. What you eat from the garden, the intelligence of that consciousness, it comes from the earth. And so when I'm thinking about, okay, so Tiokasin says all these big statements and it doesn't make sense, but yet you go and sit with the earth and you notice how the earth is listening to you. Wow, I'm going to the earth to listen, and I forgot how, because I'm taking it upon myself, because I'm a supreme being and I can go and listen to the earth, and yet the earth already knows what you're doing. And the earth has always been there doing the same thing, listening to us, granting all our needs, food, water, warmth, or even cold, and death. Something we avoid, the grieving. And so in this way of understanding that the tree has consciousness. So in the beginning of my language, I was saying, Chante washe na pechu zapielo. That has a whole explanation. Chante is heart. It also means tree. Consciousness of a tree. What is that? It is a seed, nasula. So it's our head and our heart and our vitals in a seed. because we have no brain, we have heart, and that's our heart, is all of that parts. And so a tree cha is when a seed goes into the earth, and it could wait thousands of years before it gets the instruction or feels the consciousness, okay, it's my time. And then it blooms, it germinates, and comes above the ground, and comes a little tree, a little one. And yet it's learning how to live with all the insects, the bugs, and it's asking all this time, because it becomes a hydrologist, and someone who studies the geologist, archaeologist, all of those scientific things. It is, and it hasn't gone to school. It just does this intuitively, the consciousness. And so it comes above the ground and understands by watching the weather, feeling the weather, getting rained and snowed upon, and even stepped upon. But it always is in consciousness with the stars and knows the movements of the stars, something that we've forgotten as humans, because we live in right-angled buildings. We don't have the stars. We know that the circle that is so prevalent now in many places around the world was once banned here in the United States. Native people could not sit in circles. It was against the law. And I remember that. So you see, there must have been something going on where wow, we don't want Native peoples to do that, because that we don't understand. So where is our misunderstanding within ourselves because of the language restriction that we carry, that we feel we need to express ourselves, or we're still trying to express ourselves in the box to other humans, rather than learning the expression that's outside of that box, the parabox, that trees, animates, fish, water, fire, stone, wind, all that are still expressing for eons. And so these are the elders that we know have been here in place and still trying to show us how to live with the earth. So I know Justine knows that I'm always saying peace with the earth rather than peace on the earth. And I really enjoy the fact that I put people to sleep, because I'm not talking to your head, I'm talking to your heart. And if you go among Native people, you find people falling asleep because we're speaking to the heart. People speaking to the heart. We're not speaking in concepts to the head. We're not trying to understand the concepts. We're trying to understand the feeling the feeling. And so how much of this can you take and put into the world that you are about to go back into? You know, you come on a retreat, but then why are you retreating from something that's so real to many Native people still within our languages? Why don't we have retreats as Native people? Because we're in it, we're living the language, and that living the language is being overrun by domination languages and killing these living languages. That's why I'm working so hard to say, hey, look, this living language is also within you. And we know that maybe sometime soon that because of loss of relationship with the earth, that there needs to be another way, but that solution-oriented, goal-oriented, fix-it language is not this one I'm speaking, because this is the same language that put us to sleep in the first place that we are trying to wake up with. So when I say this rock, this stone, which we call, was given in ceremony, is a wakamani. It means one who walks holy, one who walks sacred. And so when you piled your monument of stones, maybe I don't know if this is possible, and I'm not telling you, instructing you to do anything, is that maybe go, and what we do is we give tobacco, and we say, you know, this being, this ancient being that was able to transform and bring medicine in this good way. Maybe that's too elementary in this language I'm speaking to you now. Maybe it doesn't make sense. And I say this, but by example, I have fires, and and these fires, I have people address the fire because the fire is a being, and then we address each other. We say, you know, I say, don't say hello to me. That we can do. We all do that. We're here for human beings as well. True. But who's here for the fire? Who's making this a circus? Let's have the fire and introduce yourself to the fire and see how you feel, how that is so unfamiliar in the Western world. And that's what we do in the indigenous world, is that we are accepting this fire as one of the most ancient elements of consciousness. And Ketawa Hankesh Nielo means the fire without end and beginning. It's always here because it's also in us. It fires our brains, it fires our body. And so this fusion is always ongoing. So we're addressing that as well as ourselves and knowing that. And so when it comes to, you know, when we're gathering in this circle around the fire, with the fire, then I'm trying to guide people away from the human doing. This is what humans do. And the food that you're digesting now because you just had lunch is also a ceremony. You see, and often you need more blood in your stomach, your tummy, because it's digesting, it's working. So, you know, the timing of this could, you know, is good, always good, because it's meant to be, and this is our latest technology that we can actually talk to each other, or at least hear me. I don't know how I'm doing with people, if I'm making sense at all. And of course, I have to standardize what I'm feeling into this narrow language. So what I was going to do was have you take a stone and bring it with you, and that stone is recording everything that you're saying, that you're feeling, and all the presence around you, other human beings, other life, and carry it with you throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, if you had remembered exactly its position, where you got it from, and you would put it back down and take it home and give it a big thanks for being here. Now the stone will give other stones the message, and all other life forms a message, because there's no true concept or word for death in Lakota, because everything is alive all the time. So, and then because it's outside of the context of doing such childish or simple things, it's really a quantum physics language. For instance, if I say mni, M-N-I, using the alphabet language, we have no alphabet, we don't need a written language in our language. So if I say mni in Lakota, I can say water in English. So it's water in English, but we don't have a word for water in English or in Lakota. So what does that mean if we don't have a word for water? And then you have to check your mind. Why don't you have a word for water? And then, so it comes out to where it's the sound that we have. The E, as far as I can tell and have been heard, is that E is a mani, is water is basically a carrier of knowledge, of consciousness, but it's expressed this way. MNI. E is voicing. Ni is living. And the in mini, the is that which is related between you and I and all things. So when I say mani, I'm feeling, voicing the living relationship between you and I and all things. And that's water to you. Because it's true. Water is everywhere, and water is consciousness. Just like fire, just like everything that makes us up. Consciousness without conscience. And what brings conscience is domination, rules and regulations. But without conscience, there is consciousness, only respect for all other life forms, and other humans. And with that thought process, I wanted to say that once you are able to understand these elements of stone or earth and water, by the way, I have water here that is from the oldest river supposedly in the world. And it's ironic that the oldest river, one of possibly two rivers in the world that are the oldest river, is in North America. And it's in North Carolina, West Virginia, the states. And it's a river called the New River, but it's supposedly the oldest river in the world. So this is the water that I have that I was wanting to give you some thought processes and maybe a practice. But I think I've done one of those things about how to approach stones and not take them with you, not take them home. Because maybe we forgot to ask, do you want to come home with me? And, you know, what I've done is taken down what people consider altars, and I've returned all the stones to where I remember they came from. And that felt so good that I returned what I thought, you know, would be personal power. And when I did that, it was so understandable that all is power. And there's nothing personal about it. Because if we recognize all is power, then we are the same. We don't itemize power. Earth is not a noun. So we return all of that objects, right? And so in this way, feeling like a hypocrite, this is not mine. This I use, I've been asked to use as long as possible to help interpret, to help understand. And someday this will go back to South Dakota, if not through me, by its own. So now, how do we do that? How do I describe that other than some kind of magic? These wotai, these stones that are connected to the universe, because they come from the universe, they have knowledge, they have consciousness, and without trying to subjectify a stone, is the fact that it was here before us. It has come to us, maybe for us to understand that it doesn't belong to us. There's no ownership of anything. So in this way, I'm really trying to understand intuition better in a way, because this language has to say that intuition better. I wish I could speak it or express it in my language into English, but this is the best I can do. So I feel like I'm doing what's required rather than the best, because I don't know what best means. I know what is required. there's so much more. I think for now, we could take a breather. And if it's possible, if you want to ask a question or maybe discuss something even further, I would totally enjoy that right now, because I want to speak to the human being in you, not what we should do as humans. And if that's possible, speak up or come too close to the camera so I can hear. I think it's important to have dialogue also. And mainly because I need to take a drink of some fluid. So please come forward if you want, or maybe Justine can express a question so I can hear it.
Hi, I'm Holly. Tiokasin, I would like to ask you, I have heard and read about some of the ceremonies where various Native American groups gather in one place and spontaneously a structure emerges rather than having a top-down kind of structure of organization where, you know, someone tells someone else, okay, you do this and you do that. But people come together in an organic way and intuitively just kind of fall into place and know what to do. I've seen that, I've heard it, you know, about it. I'd like to know, is that a real thing? And can you say more about that, how that could work?
Okay, thank you for that. Your name?
Holly. I'm sorry, Holly. Yes, Holly.
Holly. Hi, Holly. Okay, thank you for that. That is something. So we don't have routines or rituals. There's ceremony, but it's not really ceremony. It's kind of like what we do, right? And it's based upon the uploading consciousness of the earth. So it's uploading to us. And so that, I guess you would say, see, this is the language. The earth gives us instructions on what to do, right? So where's the intuition in that? So this is why the intuition, the unseen is more important, because that's the Inila Wakan, that's the, and your language would be holy silence. So it's the Inila Wakan that really puts us in place through intuition. And so when it comes to gathering and understanding what's emerging, it's all energy to us. Everything is energy. And so we're speaking an energy, a language that describes energy and then the motion of the energy. But there must be protocol, not ceremony, not ritual, not rules or regulations or an instruction manual, is how to be spiritual. And there's no book, there's no religion about how to be spiritual, because that doesn't make sense. But it's the earth that you're always in relationship, that is always coming through you to say, okay, for the good of all, this ceremony will put you in place. So I've seen that, but we must also prepare like a communication device that we were instructed from the earth, as far as I can tell. And so this protocol, you have certain, like the directions, like we have 260 directions, 260 colors, 260 sounds in our language. And so you're understanding all of that balance within it. And it's nice to understand that you can go in any direction and find what you need, rather than a linear sense of control. So this is why it's always Native people it takes so long to organize, you know, unless we're doing it the Western way. So the organization is already implanted in the earth. And so going by feel intuition, that really comes through. And the more you're around people who have that experience for eons, it's easier to understand it. And as you said, you've experienced it. But what I can add to that, because I want to say that about what, not my knowledge, but my thinking, is that magic that you think is magic in that sense of the humanistic world. So magi merely is only a one who uses the tools of the earth properly. That's magi. And one who uses the tools of the earth properly creates magic. But human beings, through technology, through our own this deceit, deception of ourselves, we create, I guess, I don't know what the word is, but we fool ourselves by being magicians of technology, by being magicians of spiritualism, by being magicians of all of these knowledges, information, because there's no wisdom in it anymore. So the bird who is flying is a magi, using the tools of the earth, creating the magic. A fish is a magi. So these is what is we are not using properly, because we're gouging the earth, we're polluting the air, we're polluting, destroying the water and all other life. So we're magicians, thinking that we can get away from what we've created, the destruction. And there is no language yet to understand this is what we must do to resolve the destruction. And this is what Native people are still in, trying to say, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, without forcing people how to do things, how to proselytize, how to instruct, is that you do it intuitively. And it's not so far away, it's just outside the door. But we always do it with the creation stories, because that's the longest story of all of us. And it has to be without dogma and domination. So in this way, I think part of understanding the magic is that humans too can be magi. We can still be magi if we lose ourselves, lose the illusions, the magicianship of technology that has become a religion, that has turned into artificial intelligence. All of these things that humans have done is not so supreme after all, when the bird can still fly without polluting the earth and the air. So we tend to not have the language of reality, and we're looking for the rationalizations to avoid the reality. And this is the language I'm talking about. So it's just not that one is better or worse. It's just a position, or it's a, how do you say it? A way to know that there is a different thought process out there, but we all feel energy, but we don't know what to do with the energy that we have. So, but that's a great question. And I have no idea if I answered your question, Holly.
Thank you very much. I think I could pick out some things that I can understand, but it's as you say, the languages are different, so it's a little bit of a mystery for me. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, thank you. Now you said something at the end there too, mystery. What does mystery mean to you? In my experience, even after 30 years on the radio in public in 120 some stations in North America and South America, is understanding mystery is it understands you first. And in native country and native people that I know that are still within their being as native people, that these native people aren't trying to solve the mystery. But then I have the Western education too. And in this education, linear education, you're instructed to try to solve the mystery. Take things apart, analyze them, measure them, weigh them, all these, possess them. And that's trying to solve the mystery. And I think that's why people are going crazy. Because if you try to solve the mystery, you never can. But where I come from, the native people, we aren't trying to solve the mystery. We accept it. And that's, to me, the best imagination, the best possibility is that you know it's there and you accept it because you are that same mystery. Without possessing it, you are just in it. So there's a difference. One is going crazy because of the thinking to try to solve and own the mystery, God, dogma, domination, possession. And the other ones are like, that's not for us, but it is us. We're not going to solve it because we can't. So this is part of understanding that there are differences. Yes, we're all humans. We are all humans. And maybe there's some who still hold how to have peace with the earth. And maybe you do. Maybe we're fledgling as a human species. So, you know, I talk this way because I sometimes sense like I'm educating the wisdom out of myself. And I don't want to do that. I don't want information and knowledge to get in the way because information usually creates mind junk and concepts. So I want to feel what my heart is feeling and express it somehow that I can in this language. I cannot express that as well in this language, but in my language, I can express it because it's not about me. And when you express it with all life around you, it's endless mystery how you can express that. But heart is an organ, right? That we say it's a heart, it beats, and we use it romantically. And we say it's love. And that's our understanding of the human. But when you go outside of ourselves in this container of this body, it's all around. And there's no perfection. Doesn't need to be. Wow. I think about it. I feel it that way. So I think through my heart. I don't think through my head. It's difficult for me. So this is why I'm trying not to educate the wisdom out of myself. Because that intellectual way of being, it's getting in the way of intelligence. And so I appreciate the water, the fire, the wind, and all that living nature out there. And it's so intelligent just to keep going as it is. And us fragile human beings trying to hang on for whatever pleasure we can get out of extracting it by dominating. And yeah, I think right there, I don't know what else to say. I think there's more to feel. So if you do have another question or a suggestion, that would be great. The earth doesn't need a masculine or a feminine. It doesn't need division like that. because it's there anyway. We're the one who separated ourselves from that, and we're trying to find a quick fix. And a lot of Native women, my aunt also has gone to feminine or feminist movements, and she's observed it and listened to it and understood it, and she said that they're missing something, that the earth is feminine, and that's what they're talking about, trying to balance the feminine and balance the masculine. But when you're out of relationship and you're only trying to connect at certain times to have advantage, then it doesn't make sense in the whole, because we're just parsing it so that we can control our place in that thought process. So this is the 6th day or 7th day for you all. Really, it's the first day. Tomorrow you go home to your place. How much of this can you carry and really put into place in the background of your country, of your neighborhood, of your city? How much can you really work what I'm explaining? Will it change the way you live? Can it change? Are we thinking of the next generation, not just of humans, but the generations of all other beings? Are we just worried about what's going on in Ukraine when it's really been going on all the time? All these things that we didn't have concepts for, like war. So, it's not to make you feel bad. It's like we need to step back from what we've assumed to be correct. We need to step back from those religions, that science. We need to step away from that to like really understand, wow, that's what I want to change, when it really is within you. The root consciousness, ahutka, the consciousness of the earth, that the trees have, that those beings that have rootedness are consciously have been doing this before this language. So these are the languages of 200,000 years old. And I'm speaking in the context of, I'm referring now to a language or even the way of thinking that's very, very young, 4,000 years old, out of Greece. And so my reference points are not Greece. They're the 200,000-year-old sustainable cultures with the earth. So we must carry on our dancing, in a sense. Keep dancing, keep singing, keep doing what we can, because the earth wants us to. The earth needs us. And I think you call it climate change. We don't have that, because that's outside of us. It's within us. I don't think we have to change as much, but just maybe we're facing the right direction, but we don't know the path to take. Right. And I'm not going to speak academically, hardly ever. And I may not say all the things that you want to hear, but that's the change. Do we accept that? Have we really been listening to understand? Or are we putting our concepts in the way of what we're hearing? Yeah. So this is where I am. There's a question right there.
April. So my husband wants that I'm bring everything what you said to him, but really I have no idea. I was off all the time. How can I bring this to him? Is there a way?
I would say that your body understands before your head does. So by just being you and being aware that you were here at this time, that your body already understands that. And if you carry this light in a way that you already have, that you just be you and not have to present it in words or concepts, but that energy will affect him. And in that good way, you carry it. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, hello, Mothia.
Hi.
I'm going to say this all wrong, so I'm. There was a promise made here in this land in Europe 700 years ago under an oak tree, and then in your land on Turtle Island, I hear there was a promise made by the Iroquois around this time, the Great Law of Peace, and I don't know whether with the Lakota and the Iroquois, whether there's similarity, but I just wanted to know whether you know of, because it's something that I'm trying to work with about some instruction that came from the Iroquois and went to the American, or those who came over to Turtle Island, and they mistranslated. This is why I understand they mistranslated something, and it came back to the European imagination and heart, but there was a betrayal of something. So I'm trying to understand do you know of this betrayal, and can the instruction that was given then be renewed in some way, or is it lost? If that makes sense. I'm just trying to say it the way that you.
No, it does. Thank you. First of all, it's not lost. As you say, it's been mistranslated. But you feel the mistranslation. You feel there's something there because you're still carrying the story from what was in that time misunderstood. The Americans or the Europeans at that time came to conquer, they came to dominate, they came to own, they came to steal, they came to do all the things that was happening to them. And the instruction was to learn how to have peace with earth first, rather than peace on the earth. You cannot own the earth, you cannot own anything. And this is the great law of peace, not only with the Iroquois, because they were in the eastern seaboard of Turtle Island, but you get deeper into North America, in this case, there are also the same laws of peace. And this is the ultimate generosity, the ultimate appreciation. So if you're speaking a language of abundance, this is the key. If you're speaking a language of lacking, you will always want, you will always need, you always have to possess. And your language would be, I want, I need, I got to have, tell me how to do things. And so that's always a need. So we're always crying out for more. This creates greed. But if we appreciate what's here, your body, yourself, your knowledge, we appreciate that. You see other life forms also have knowledge and appreciation. And appreciation, as my ancestor would say, is the highest form of intelligence in relationship. So in that way, that's having peace with the earth. We don't have to destroy what we are right now, but we are doing it. And in this way in North America, there are so many, there used to be thousands and thousands of languages spoken here. in the United States, there's barely 120 spoken now. And a lot of those languages are dying, and the magic is disappearing because people are forgetting how to live with the earth, how to be magi. And that you don't need technology to do that. So I think it's going to come around where we're going to have to come back to this magi and learn how to work with the earth and use the earth, or let the earth use us in a good way. The earth wants to use us too, but our peace on the earth as domination is getting in the way. So when we have peace with the earth, it totally changes everything. So I think 3 words, peace with the earth. And it's up to you to know how to do that, because that's your responsibility. Yes.
Thank you.
So language is important. That I can try to explain that. We don't speak, that poetry, the etymology, the root of the word poetry means to make something sacred. So those of you who are poets, and if you know this already, this is the closest that you can come to in this language to my language, in Lakota. To make something sacred with just your words, without being benevolent. So language is important. And I say that because, it doesn't come with a price, that health is given freely. But look what we do as humans. We put a price on it. Water is not charging you for drinking it. But we have a responsibility to not charge. Food grows generously. But look what we do to it. How old are those concepts? Maybe that's the structure we have to look at. Because if the human people are constantly doing this to themselves, they're doing it to the earth, and it's affecting the rest of the world. Even the ant that crawls on the floor in front of you. So in this other way, it's this idea of sustainability. Sustainable development doesn't work if we're doing it from a fresh, innocent place of Western philosophy. And I think that's what I'm feeling, that where we want who we were back. We want who we were, but we can't find it with the same language that put us to sleep in the first place. We cannot wake up with that same language, the same logic. And yeah, this may be the last time you see me or hear from me, because maybe you don't want to hear me anymore. But it's always going to be there. Not to make you feel bad, but to keep stirring it up, because that's what's needed now. We can't be doing our best anymore. We must do what's required. We just can't merely expect things to happen to us because we are human beings, because it's happening to us because we're human beings. I really would say that the simple languages that we have to understand, and I do this constantly also, I'm getting a little Western here, that I'm speaking a language, it feels this way, and I'm speaking in a language of hospicing modernity. I'm trying to get what was here before the virus. I'm trying to get, and all the time I'm hospicing a way of living that's dying. So we must do what's required so that all life can live, not just a human. And we must understand that, we're speaking a lacking of, I have to get, tell me how to do something. That's privilege. Instead of taking responsibility of, wow, I am okay with doing this. It doesn't matter what I own, what other people think of me. As long as I know the earth will always guide you in a good way, no matter what. The earth does that. Yeah, I think, well, I certainly hope I didn't depress any of you out there or make you feel bad, because I do not want to do that. Yeah. So, and I could tell you some of my things that are going on here. My things is that I'm considered they have a slang over here called BIPOC, Black Indigenous People of Color. But I remember a time when the Indigenous peoples were not put into that category. It was Black people and people of color, but before Black, there was people of color. And now they put Black Indigenous people of color. And then they give us land acknowledgement, saying, well, the natives, we're living in the land of the Lenape, all that. We acknowledge that we did this and we did that. But there's no action. And it feels performative. And I wonder if that's what we're doing. We're performing for who? So when I think about, okay, Indigenous peoples, I remember not being called Indigenous peoples. I remember other words of, wow, that was not very nice being called those words by the Americans. So I wondered, why are we now people of color? When this came along in my high school days, it's like, oh, I get it. They do not want us to be people of consciousness. They want us to fit in like, I am Black, I am white, I'm red, I'm yellow, I'm green. They want us to fit us in so that they could manipulate us in a schematic of not having consciousness, that we are merely a color, and this is how those people of color act and behave. So I when I was young, I thought, oh, this is what they're doing. They're trying to control people by taking away their consciousness and inserting a conscience. This is how you do it. This is how you're a good citizen. This is how you save the world, save the earth. This is your conscience. And if you're not doing it right, you're not going to go to heaven. You're going to go to hell. You're not going to get all the benefits of civilization. So if it's truly consciousness, that's merely intuition of the earth. So I sound like I'm being redundant here. Yeah. So, I'm having to deal, since I'm in media a lot, I'm having to deal with artificial intelligence, and that it has become the new religion. And it hides underneath that the matrix. The matrix is artificial intelligence, the military industrial complex, all of these things that we don't want to deal with, that they happen to all human beings, which is not true. All humans do not think the same as Europeans. We are different. Let's accept that. Some have never known war. Some don't have words for want. Some don't have words for ownership, domination. So when we say all human beings are this way, that's not true. I know that. I'm so glad that we're different. Right? And so there's a lot of prophecy that we know is coming true. There's a lot of prophecy. So I was on to close this a little bit, I'm going to tell you what we did when the virus came. As Lakota people, especially one place where I'm coming from. I had just returned from being with the Aborigine in Australia. And I got here March 7th and back to New York. And out of that time, that's when they start closing things down. And it was March 16th of 2020 that I had received instructions from my elders that I was to hold 33 fires every week, once a week for 33 weeks. And so I would go outside and have a fireplace out here, and people would arrive without agenda. We're not here to fight the virus. We're not here to make an enemy of the virus or come up with science to solve the problem that we think the virus has presented. And so for 33 weeks, we did this. And I'm going to jump to the end here of those 33. On that 33rd week, when the final coals were extinguished in pitch darkness, and the coals matched the stars in the universe, a big light, a slow moving light came right over us. And it was maybe 15 seconds, and there were maybe 9 or 10 of us that were left out of the fire of maybe 40 or 50 people. They witnessed this. But let's go back to the beginning of this. 33 was also the pleshla, or the tobacco ties that we were instructed to put on our doors. Now remember, in the Lakota language, there's no such word as superstition. Don't need it, because everything is practical. It's not hope. It's not any of this superstition. So 33 meant that there were 33 different intelligences that the virus brought. 33 intelligences that the human being, the human race, has forgotten how to live with the earth. And that we should never treat the virus as if it was an enemy, something to conquer, something to fight, something to destroy. Because we think it's here to do that to us. And yes, everything gets sick, but everything also wants to live. And I thought, in my wild way of thinking, that, wow, if this was an alien, I wouldn't come back as a human being. I would come back maybe as a virus or a plant. Wow, how intelligent is that? That it came here to change everything so that maybe we'd be more humble as humans. That we really step away from ourselves and let the earth have her motion of showing us how to live, adapt her needs to us, right? So we would adapt to her. So these 33 intelligences also, if any of you are doctors out there, I have a doctor friend. When I told her this story, her mouth dropped. The jaw was down here. And she said, did you know that there are 33 variants of this virus? And we talked about that and saying, well, this knowledge has been left out and treated like it doesn't matter because it's not logical. Nothing makes sense what Native people are doing because it's not the dominative way of thinking. So in this way, this is still at work. Until we understand the peace with Earth, we will always create the viruses that have always been here for longer than we have as an enemy. Because we're so selfish as humans. We are anthropocentric. It's only about us all the time, that we forget the intelligence that we're surrounded by, that we live within. So, yeah. So I wanted to tell you about that. And accepting life as it is, I think if we let go of trying to control it, then I think we're in a good place. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tiokasin. It's always such a benefit to our groups to have your teaching. We're really, really grateful to have you included in this week. So let's express some form of appreciation to Tiokasin. I don't know whether it's a heart bow or something.
Someone has a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Alex. So something that you just said has really resonated with me. In the last 2-3 years, I've been writing a lot of poetry and developing some abilities that I didn't know I had. And I'm really struggling because I know that I should dedicate my life to communicating these messages. But I struggle with the concept of how do I make a living that's not putting a monetary value on these gifts. I'm kind of really struggling with that because obviously I, still live in a Western world where I need to pay rent and food and etc. So that's my challenge. And I know you sort of touched upon that briefly. So I don't know if you could share any.
Yeah. In my language, and see, maybe I'm lucky in thinking this or saying this, but unlucky because I say it, is that there is no such word as poor and rich in my language. That if you go to either extreme, that's binary thinking. So we don't know how to be poor as natives. We don't know how to be rich because those are off-center. So what I have done, because at one time in my life, I did work in a legislative sense with the governments and earned a lot of money. And I was so far away from myself. I became rich and I didn't want to be poor, but yet the poor and the rich want the same thing. And I began to understand, like, I cannot work in that world, live in that world. How am I going to pay bills? How am I going to, be able to feed anything, my family, whatever? Then something just happened and snapped within me, saying, those are languages and thought processes that don't work with the earth, because she's always abundant. So my language is abundance. Poetry can be abundant. So when I'm thinking about, okay, I've been always chasing money around because that was the logic given to me. But when it switched for me was when I stopped chasing money around. And yeah, I was poor because that was a fear. And like, okay, but I'm not treating fear as a being. I'm not respecting fear. I'm not working with it. So the minute I begin to understand that fear is a being, wow, I respect fear because that's everywhere. I respect not being fearful because that's everywhere. Where's the balance? So instead of saying yes and no to things, I began to understand the if process. The if is I'm in between and I am the balance part of that, the balance. And so I stopped chasing money around. Now I don't have much money and I don't need that much money. Is that money is following me now. Money follows me, not because I have, a company or it's a family will or anything like that. I don't need that because that's not my purpose here, is to always give freely of self, because when you're generous from that place, it comes back to you. And that's intuition. That's, as you say, karma. And so just continue to be generous of who you are and keep creating, because every moment is innocent. Without guilt, without that, this will never be the same. This moment, even that moment, will never happen again. So you're in the plentiness, the plentiful, you're in the abundance of being here now. And that's the most regenerative way of thinking, is that every moment is innocent, because it is. And that's wealth to me. And that will lead you any place, and it will follow you any place. And what you need physically, that will fall away, and soon you will be giving it away anyway. Not because you extracted it from other people, other whatever, the Western way, the European way, but because it's been given to you that you need to give away. This is the philosophy of Native people, that we give all the time, because that's our nature. We're generous. We don't hoard it to get through hard times, you know, and because we're avoiding death, because we don't know how to live. So how do you live? You're generous. Your language becomes generous. You become generous. And we don't teach how to be leaders. We don't teach how to be followers. We only teach how to walk with. And wow, when you're walking with, like, I'm getting chills saying that. But if I'm leading, I'm alone. And I'm following, then what does that mean? That I'm not having enough. I'm looking for instruction. I don't know who I am. The other way is I know who I am. I'm, you know, whatever. And you're alone. So both ways are extreme. But if you're walking with, all that is, you're in the peace with Earth. So I'm glad you asked that question, and thank you for that. It's a great way to be. So being in a Kantu to consciously apply mystery to everything. Consciously apply mystery to everything. That works. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, thank you. And especially to the last bit that you said, it felt incredibly personal to my situation. So that's, yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Is it time for one more question?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, hi Tiokasin. I've been thinking about something you said about it's in our DNA of our people to make peace with the earth. And since I've been here on this land, I've had a sense of the Celtic people and the Druids, and I just felt that they know how to, that they understood how to make peace with the earth. But I don't know, is it still possible to sort of tap into that DNA and understand that knowledge and somehow, you know, sort of live it now, in the sense that also ask someone else about ancestry? And personally, I don't really understand ancestry and how they can help us, but the way you put it within our DNA, I thought maybe that is one of the answers as well.
Yeah. No, these are good questions and good thought processes that you have. There is no answer. That's strictly a Western way of thinking. Question, answer, cause and effect. So it's subjective to us. Is that if we don't have it, then we got to have it. I feel insecure. I better find the answer. Give me the answer. So when we don't do that, we find that the addictive language for answer to having answer. And that's like sidestepping the mystery. We're not really accepting intuition as like gravity. That's what intuition is. It's like gravity. It's all around us. So when you talk about the Druids, the ancient people there, they haven't gone anywhere. They're still there. They're in the rocks, the stone. They're in the Ama, the memory of the earth. Like I said, the stone, all these have memory. We do too. We have memory, just like the earth, since we're made up of the earth, the same components, elements. There is no memory loss. We're just not attaining that intuition by living with the earth. So when we live with the earth, there's more of that concepts cannot understand, but somehow we feel more like, wow, that does feel the energy of it. So when we're away from the consciousness of energy, we're always trying to put it into religious connotations or analytical connotations or cause and effect, question, answer. And so we think in a linear way in the West. And that I see is changing throughout the world, that we no longer can think in beginning and ending in a linear way. This is the steps to get there, and this is how you're going to make it through. But once you make it through to the end, what's after that? So it's a continuum. We must recognize our place in that continuum. And the only thing that we can, as far as I know, is intuitive values, intuitive languages. And so part of that is understanding, to me, you're not a man, she's not a woman, you're a being of energy that's needed to keep the balance. So, you know, to me, the stories that we have, the dreams that we have, to me, this is common sense. It's nothing to do with being a medicine man or a spiritual guru or you know, any wise man on a hill or anything like this. This is common sense. Maybe that's what we need, that we forgot the common sense. This is what we do. This is who we are. And so your DNA, my uncle describes as descendants, now ancestor. Right? In other words, our ancestors went into the future. They died first, so they went into the future. They're making our way. Right? So they're the ancestors. They're in the future. In the Western way, the ancestors are back there. They're back there. And so we don't have elders. But in the other way, ancestors are guiding us. The earth, all these elements, those are the ancestors. And you can't write a book about that. You can have to feel it, that the sacred made us. We don't make things sacred. It's already spiritual. We don't make spirituality. The same way as a garden grows us. We didn't grow the garden. You know, how arrogant is that to say that's God, and without ever understanding what mystery is. Ever. We never will. So we can't say that it's someplace or the other. It's everywhere. So just be who you are and know that there's no answer. That everything has memory. Everything. And you don't have to go out and put a cape on like a druid or burn a candle when it's supposed to. Forget holidays. The earth is never going to be a holiday. So, you know, these human things that we're doing to the earth has to cease one of these days, because she's excuse me, she's going to cull, she's going to hold back the domination, excuse me. She's going to hold back the domination species. And right now it's the humans. She's going to have to hold back, as you see those of us who are natural. You see that in nature. There's too many deer, she's going to pull that back somehow. There's too many of something, she's going to pull it back. So when we think too much of ourselves, that's greed, selfishness. And so now she's going to pull that back. So I think we have to accept that maybe it's us that are out of balance, not the earth. Just being heartful, not mindful, because you can be mindless. So, but thank you for that.
Thank you, Justine.
Thank you very much for what you've shared. I'm not going to pretend I understood everything, but it made a lot of sense to me. I just had a comment or wanted to clarify just before the question. You mentioned that humans are selfish, and being on this land, having the experience I've had, to me it felt more like, well, certainly in our part of the world, we may have lost our way but I felt that should we find back the way, I don't necessarily feel that humans are selfish, or else for that matter. I don't know if it's silly to say that, but that's how I feel.
Okay, yes, no, thank you for that. And I try to explain it in a good way. If there's no I, subjective, lonely, there is no need to be selfish. But if you're an I in a way of a verb, then you're a part of everything. And if there's no word in our language, Lakota, then why are there 235 words for self in English? You know, it's all about us anthropocentrically. We're the only ones that need more than any other species. We just keep needing and needing, and look at us. Look what we're doing. We're taking everything from something else and then trying to say, I'm good now. But maybe that's the way, is to learn how to be strong within lacking. How to be strong within the mystery of not having. There's no word for greed in a lot of languages, but that's why they don't have a word for want. So maybe it's just being grateful, thankful for what, in a sense, you have. You have food, you have water, but for how long? We have, we could say, oh, we have books and we have music. Other species don't need that because they are that. You see, there's no word for art in Lakota, but look what we do into ourselves. That we have art because we're not living the language. And there are living languages that don't have word for art because they are the art. You see, they're living the art. And that's the difference that I'm merely stating, is that there is differences in that, but we're all here together. We can't say we are one because we're many parts of everything. Yeah, so in that good way, it's difficult for me to try to explain it, because I feel in English there's no exit strategy from it, that we have to keep the wheel going.
Yeah.
But yet I know in Lakota, I don't have to join it. I can accept it as part of me.
Yes, I understand. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Justine?
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 Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Jarrie.
Hi.
I'm from England, and I am selfish. And 7 years ago, I came back from a retreat and was gifted some messages. I believed I was purely a conduit for these messages. Certain people I've let read them, said, oh, you should get them published. But I never, and I'm sorry for using the word but I won't be able to articulate it if I don't. I've never felt that I wanted any financial reward for messages that have come from another world. And I know they come from the spirit world. A lot of what you've been saying, I've already got in a couple of lines amongst a number of messages. And then 3 years ago, I'd been partying a lot and had a near-death experience. And again, I was allowed to stay here because I said I had things to do, and then never done it. And I'm fortunate that I've ended up in this place, a fabulous, fabulous communion, that when I go back and my friends asking me what it's about, well, I'm going to have to say, well, I've been talking to the trees. I've listened to the earth. The earth's given me a message: walk before you can run. And they're going to look at me and say, you need to go and get your head shrunk. But I know that's the truth. I know that's the path to follow. And what I would like to do is, I believe in I trust my intuition. An exercise that we've done here, I drew a circle to step into intuitively, and it took me what I experienced within that intuitive circle enlightened me. And I still don't know how I'm going to get that message out written in Western print. So I'd like to gift it. And so if you have any ideas where I could gift it to anonymously, I'd be very welcome to hear it.
Who you could gift a book, or you mean
No,
print?
it's just the, I don't call them poems, the messages, and they're not poems. So I'd like to serve for a better purpose for Mother Earth. If we can get the message out in the Western world, to be able to at least reflect, plant some seeds, and maybe something will grow. And in 1,000 years,
Okay.
who knows?
I think I'm getting the gist of this is that when you said you had a near-death experience, immediately, no, you didn't. You had a near-life experience. You came to know what life was all about. So, not that you avoided death, is that you were avoiding life. And we can't go back to anything. We can't go ahead to anything. So the language is, we need to be present in the present consciousness. So where's our language to be here rather than in the future or in the past? And you said to get the world out in the Western world, or the message out into the Western world, but maybe it's getting the message into the Western world. I think everybody, but when we make the message bigger, when we make ourselves bigger than the message, it's not a message. So in that way, what is the message? Like the radio program that I've been doing or hosting, it's always been, the message has always been bigger than me, always. And in that way, you're in a good relationship that it's not about you. You are not the center of the universe, right? And I think that's what I'm saying, is that we need to understand the continuum that we are involved, where we are at the present time, not what can be better or future, or the whale that we can save or saving the earth because of what we did in the past, because that has regrets. Stop promising yourself anything, because that's when you do it when you're happy. And then when you don't, you're regretting what you didn't do. So when you're here now, your language needs to be present. A rock is present always. the floor. And how do we do that is when I say verb language, your glasses, these glasses to me are not just glasses, they're glassing. The shirt you have on is not a shirt, it's shirting. It's doing, it's created to do what they're doing. They're being, they're moving, the energy in that form. And so, you know, where's our appreciation for this keeping us warm? You know, where's the floor? It's a flooring, is doing what it's created to do. The wall is walling, the ceiling is ceiling, the ladder is laddering, the chair is chairing. So wow, you are consciously applying mystery to everything now, but there's no language. You always have to make concept up for that. To consciously apply language, consciously apply mystery to everything. It kind of makes sense, but when you just say wakan in my language, that doesn't make sense because you are the energy of all of it anyway. So what is death and what is life? You're living and dying in the same moment, and that moment is now. So I think getting away from the standardized way of thinking English or Western is part of what we must be doing now, because that domination thinking is, and it's archaic. War doesn't work anymore. Feudalism doesn't work. Superiority doesn't work. Neither is inferiority. But people don't understand the loss that they're feeling because it's grieving our distancing from the earth. We are grieving that we don't have relationship with the earth. So we make up hurry words, hollow phrasing words such as connected. Let's get a instruction manual to do that. Someone has to tell me, not the earth. Someone has to tell me. So when we're not in the present language of the earth, we're always going to be in the human knowledge or information of how to do something. So I think part of that is really stepping back in a way and understanding where we are at in the innocence of who we are. And if that makes sense to you, then it does. And if it doesn't, that's okay too.
No, I know what I'm doing with them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Silence covers the earth now. Wow. And silence is intuition. Your mind is not busy anymore. And I think we all miss that. And even when we're trying to be silent, I still hear people thinking. Wow. So in my language, doksha ake wachingtelo le unki piki hohewashtelo wopila tanka. It was good for us to be here. I'll see you again in the circle of life. The universe, you made the universe. You made the universe feel good by recognizing who you are. And so with making the universe feel good, you know already who you are, because that is your purpose, to make all life feel good. Yeah, so I'd like to say it in that way, as much as I understand it. Peace with Earth.